Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at Chapter Approved 2025. This video is sponsored by the Game Bunker. More on that later. Chapter Approved 2025. Asymmetric missions and catch-up mechanics come to Warhammer 40,000. Alright, so we got the brand new 2025-26 mission deck coming out right here. Let's take a look at what Games Workshop has to say about it. Back during the Adepticon preview, we had a light to look over the future of competitive Warhammer 40,000 scene. Back during the Adepticon preview, we had a light look over the future of competitive Warhammer 40,000 scene. The chapter approved 2025-26 mission deck. And with only a few short days until it goes up for pre-order, it's time for a closer look at the new gameplay mechanics coming soon to a battlefield near you. Alright, so we know these mission decks typically last about 1 year, and they're essentially like the more competitive way to play, or the standardized way to play. But the real thing, when people hear competitive, sometimes they get turned off by it, but it's really all about balance. So the idea of competitive is to essentially balance the game, so there's still some random elements to it, but you're going to have the most close, most fair, most fun game of 40k out there. And I have found that over the last few years, Games Workshop has gotten very good at this. Now every game's not going to be perfect. Player skill, army composition, and then also just faction selection can definitely make a difference. There's good matchups, there's bad matchups, but realistically, Warhammer 40,000 10th edition is the most balanced it has ever been. This expansive deck of missions, maps, and more presents 3 ways to play match-play games of Warhammer 40,000. Incursion, Strike Force, and Asymmetric War. This time, 1,000-point incursion matches have their own set of deployment maps to better balance smaller games, along with a couple of unit restrictions. Alright, and there is a little note at the bottom. It says you're going to be restricted to 2 of each unit instead of 3. While the optional asymmetric war rules will be a big draw for fans of ever-changing strategic challenges. Alright, so we have our 1,000-point incursion games with a little bit of changes to balance there with limited unit restrictions and then also closer objectives. We have our Strike Force, typical 2,000-point games, which are balanced for matched or competitive play. And then we have Asymmetric War, which is designed to be like a little more thematic, and the balance element is removed, where you're going to have like deployment zones and special rules that are not equal to both players. So 3 different ways to play the game, some similar to what we're familiar with, some a little bit different. So very, very cool. And then of course we also have like Combat Patrol, which is sort of its own thing that's balanced in its own right. And here we can see the new card deck. So really cool new box right here. Definitely some nice looking cards. And then you do get 2 decks. So essentially like one player can share this deck with the other player if they don't have one. There's also apps available to be able to use the cards if you don't have the physical cards. But we know in the past that these things are very popular. Everybody wants a set. They sell out extremely quickly, and Games Workshop takes forever to print more of them. We know they're going to be good for the entire season or 1 year. So if you are looking to get these, make sure you are ready. Make sure you get your pre-order in with your local store, because once they are gone, they take forever to get again, and then they are expensive to pick up online. As the name suggests, these missions have deployment maps that give the attacker and defender entirely different zones, representing desperate last stands, sudden pincher attacks, and forlorn changes against dug-in defensive lines. So very cool. The asymmetric like missions or like deployment zones will essentially have like a lot more of a kind of thematic sense to them. You have an attacker and a defender always, but in this case the attacker will have a completely different like deployment zone or mission objective than the defender. So it gives you like much more of like a thematic feel, but you are going to definitely be giving up some balance for this. Now a quick word from today's sponsor, Game Bunker. Game Bunker carries a full range of Games Workshop products, including miniatures, terrain, paint, tools, and more. Game Bunker offers 15% off MSRP for most Games Workshop products with the discount code WHMS. Receive free shipping in the continental United States on orders over $145. Online orders ship out within 24 hours. Game Bunker is a veteran-owned business. Use affiliate link below, enter discount code WHMS to save 15% on most items at checkout. For fast, friendly service with a discount on your favorite tabletop wargaming purchases, visit GameBunker.net and let them know that Warhammer Man sent you. Alright, so here we can see a couple of the cards. So we have Deployment Incursion, Dawn of War, we have Deployment Strike Force, Dawn of War, and then we have Deployment Asymmetric War, Pincher Attack. So we can see in the Deployment Incursion that the objective is still in the center. We then have 2 objectives in No Man's Land, 14 inches from the table edges, so a little bit closer to the center point. And then we have 2 more objectives that are 8 inches from the table edge deployment zone, once again a little closer to the center. And then we see for the Deployment Strike Force, Dawn of War, those same objectives, there's 1 in the center, there's 2 in No Man's Land that are 10 inches from the table edge, and then there's 2 in the deployment zone that are 6 inches from that deployment zone. So by moving the objectives a little bit further away in Strike Force or having them a little bit closer together in Incursion, it's definitely going to make a difference as to how easy it is to still participate in the game, but be controlling or fighting over objectives. And then we see the Asymmetric War Pincer Attack, so we can see the deployment zones are completely different. Here we have like a V deployment zone for the defender, and then we have a couple of smaller deployment zones in the corner for the attacker. So the attacker is going to sort of split their force, the defender is going to be like holding down a point, And in the back, there's like a no man's land area. So pretty cool overall design. Definitely going to make for some fun and thematic missions. And then we see there are little arrows at the bottom of the cards that designate like what exactly the card is. We have 1 triangle, 2 triangles, and 3 triangles. These alternative maps are a great way to shake up your usual games with unfamiliar objective placements, while building characterful battlefields to suit your asymmetric narrative. After all, you could hold your last stand on a bog standard grassy field covered in ruins, but wouldn't you rather build a mighty ring fortress or a sacrificial altar to defend? And I gotta say, I totally agree with this. Very, very cool. Asymmetric war isn't just about the deployment zones, as the normal primary missions are replaced with new objectives tailored specifically to this environment. One awards the defender 50 points just for showing up, tasking the attacker with draining their opponent's score to boost their own. So really cool. I love that they're like mixing in some more elements here. I love that they're also focusing in not just on competitive play and balance, but also asymmetric war and like having a good, fun, thematic mission. Very, very cool. The attacker always gets to go first in these missions, but in the haste, they have to deploy all of their units before the defender, giving a little bit of initiative back to the underdogs. Of course, Incursion and Strikeforce games still use the existing deployment rules and balance maps. So if you're looking for tight competitive clashes worthy of Warhammer Open Series, this deck has you covered. The greatest changes that affect all 3 mission types is the Challenger system. Replacing the secret missions from the Pariah Nexus mission deck, the new shared deck of cards gives a player falling behind a chance to catch up with either a useful stratagem or extra mission, with 1 of each on each card. So this is a super cool mechanic, very similar to like what you see in Spearhead. You're going to have essentially cards that you draw every turn, or the ability to draw a card here in 40k if you are the underdog. And then it's going to give you 2 options. You can either have something to do like stratagem-wise for 0 CP, or you're going to have something to do that's going to score you some extra points. You need to be trailing by 6 victory points at the start of the battle round before you can draw one. And you can choose either the stratagem or the mission, but not both. The modest catch-up these challenger cards provide keeps the game tense until the last moment. So a rough opening turn doesn't spell total doom for your forces. So very cool. I really like the idea of like the underdog. There's even ways to like game the system, like not scoring something. If you're already down by a couple points, to make sure that you're down by 6 so you get one of these cards. They're going to be drawn at random, but very, very cool. For even more spice in your casual and narrative games, the Asymmetric War missions and Challenger cards pair beautifully with content from the Warhammer 40,000 Crusade books, such as Tactical Reserves and Surgical Deep Strikes. From Crusade Knockmoon Gauntlet. Imagine waging a huge, sprawling siege of defenders desperately reinforce beleaguered units while recklessly brave attackers drop troops right into the midst of the bunker line. It's all possible with just the mission deck and book. Pre-order your own copy of the Vital Gameplay Companion this Saturday when the chapter-approved 2025-26 mission deck goes up on the Warhammer web store alongside a snazzy set of objective markers. And then here's the note, the rule of 3 becomes a rule of 2 for instance, and that's in your 1,000-point games. And the second note, which if you're anything like us, is more than we usually get all game. Talking about the 50 points that you start with in that specific mission. So pretty cool overall. The mission decks do sell out very quickly, so definitely make sure you get your pre-order in with your local friendly game store or online so that you can secure one of these, as once they are gone, it takes forever for Games Workshop to print more, and you're going to be stuck without them for some time or paying exorbitant prices online somewhere else. And then also we'll have the Crusade Knockmoon Gauntlet book coming out as well, so if you're looking for something a little more narrative, looking for like a Crusade or campaign, maybe that's something you'll be after. So very, very cool. I am definitely excited for these. The first edition ones that came with the Leviathan box set were really cool. And then the Pariah Nexus deck was really cool as well and really mixed it up. And now we're going to have our new chapter approved 2025-26 mission deck. Definitely excited for this as well. Oftentimes you'll see quite a bit of like carryover, so you're not learning all over again, but you're going to have like some nice new elements mixed in. It's going to be fun. It's going to mix up the scene. We got a bunch of new codexes that have come out recently. We got a bunch of points changes. Probably going to come alongside of this, as well as some rules changes. And now we're going to have completely new missions, deployment zones, and all kinds of different ways to play the game. So always a fun little shake-up for Warhammer 40,000 when the chapter-approved deck hits. So let me know if you're excited, if you're going to be picking this up, if you have any questions. Always like to hear back from you guys in the comments. And as always, special thanks to the Game Bunker for sponsoring the channel. Check out the link in the description to save 15% on most Games Workshop products with code WHMS at checkout. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and this is super exciting. And I'm out of here.